Hello there. Welcome to my Sorcerer / Sage abilities and ability tree rundown. Sorcerer and Sage abilities work exactly the same, so everything I go over with the Sorcerer, just apply it to the Sage and you'll be fine. Now this is for PvP specifically, so if you're looking for PvE, disregard most of this. Some of what you're going to learn in this can be applied to PvE, so keep that in mind. First, I'm going to start the video by reading through what each ability actually does. Reading each ability out loud can help you fully understand what each ability does, the same way reading out loud when studying for anything helps. I'll give you some quick thoughts on each ability as we go as well, and if I mention an ability and you see that you don't have it, you may not be level 80 yet, or there is a selection you must make in the ability tree. Stick around for part 2 of the video if the latter is true. Second, I will do a rundown of what abilities or passives that I take in my ability tree for PvP specifically. Keep in mind, if you're looking for a PvE rundown, let me know in the comments below if you would like to see that, and I'll make that for you guys. Third, I will show Warzone gameplay footage, where I'll give you a play-by-play and general decision making in retrospect. Fourth, I will go over what I personally use for tacticals and legendary implants. Now, a couple of things before we start. Sorc / Sage healing is a very interesting blend between proactive healing and reactive healing. I'll explain what I mean by that later in this video, so stick around. Also keep in mind that super crazy high healing numbers in a match does not necessarily mean really good healing. Being a good teammate is just as important, if not more important than getting high healing numbers. Though high numbers is very ideal and important, you can heal anywhere between 1 to 3 million and still be a crucial reason as to why your team wins. Your numbers will grow the more you begin to understand which ability to use and when, so don't worry too much about high numbers right up front, worry about effective numbers, and I'll show you what I mean as I go. Let's jump right into it, shall we? See what I did there? All right, let's just start from the top of the abilities list and just work our way down reading through it. Phase Walk. Activating this ability marks your current location for 10 minutes. When this ability is activated again, if you are within 60 meters of the marked location, you instantly return to the marked location. Phase Walk goes on cooldown for 60 seconds when used to return to the marked location. This is very clutch and it's in the ability tree as an option. I like to use this before I end up using my force barrier. So when you get into that oh no situation when you're about to go down, you're getting focused a lot, I like to phase walk out of there, and I'll show you more about that in the third part with some Warzone footage for you guys, so you'll know kind of what I mean. I like to use this before I have to use my barrier. Force barrier channels a protective barrier around you, granting immunity to all negative, controlling, and damaging effects, and building up to 4 charges for Enduring Bastion, which absorbs 24,057 damage per charge and grants immunity to interrupts for up to 5 seconds after the channel ends. This ability does not respect the global cooldown and can be used while controlled. This is your, when all else fails, you're about to die, you click this. If you're a phase walk, if you can't phase walk out of there, this is what you click when you don't want to die. It basically forces the enemy team to target other targets, or they just waste all their resources bashing into you. So this is very clutch, very obvious ability. So when you use it, it's pretty obvious that you're using it. So people more than likely move on, but sometimes they'll just bash and wail into you and not do anything. So that's great. Roaming Mend. One of your most important abilities, and basically the butter to your bread. Places a mending force on a friendly target that heals them for etc damage, heals them for etc health the next time they take damage. After healing the target, Roaming Mend travels to another friendly target within 20 meters. Roaming Mend lasts up to 30 seconds on each target and travels up to 3 times, healing up to 4 targets. Roaming Mend can only be placed on 1 target at a time. It heals a friendly target for etc health and consumes 60 force over the channel duration. Roaming Mend grants resistance to the targets it heals for 45 seconds. Resistant targets have their internal and elemental damage reduction increased by 3%. So this is just going to be bouncing around to anybody that has damage or the lowest health people that are close by. And this is where you're going to see most of your numbers, and this is easily your best heal. You want to throw this throw this out on cooldown. When it's not on cooldown, you're doing something wrong, so you just need to be throwing this out as much as you can. Reanimation revives an incapacitated ally. This ability is usable while in combat. When used, you cannot use an in-combat revival for the next 5 minutes. This is not going to apply in PvP, so you can kind of just throw it out for this guide. Secrets of the Dark Side. This is our first passive on the list. Increases the healing done by Resurgence and Renewal by 10%. That's it, just solid 10% boost to your heals. Nothing crazy, you get it at level 51. Revivification. Very important heal. Applies a periodic healing effect to up to 8 allies within 8 meters of the selected area, which heals for etc. over 10 seconds. Once a target has received the periodic healing effect, the target may leave the area and will continue to be healed by the effect. This is different than it used to be back in the day. You don't have to stand inside the circle for it to heal you for the full amount. You just kind of have to walk through it, and you just got to touch it. You just got to run through it for just a second. So that's really nice. That's really nice. Really nice addition. I really like that. Extrication. Lowers the target's threat by a moderate amount, and if the target is a group member, pulls the target to your location. I don't see this ability being used enough in PvP. Obviously, the threat's not going to do anything, but being able to pull one of your teammates, maybe a melee teammate or a ranged even, being able to pull them away from that and just give them a second to be able to either use one of their self heals or be able to heal them up so that they don't die immediately. Being able to pull them out of that sketchy situation is very good. You can even, if somebody gets knocked off the edge on something like a Void Star bridge and pulling them back on as they're getting knocked off, if you're quick, it's kind of tough to do it, can be clutch. So I feel like this ability needs to be used more by healers from what I've seen. You might annoy some of your sentinels and stuff out there that are trying to do damage, but they're really low in health and everyone's targeting them. Pulling them out of there might make them mad, but you might give them a chance to heal back up and be able to jump back in. So I recommend just doing it if they're taking excessive amounts of damage, trying to pull them behind an object for line of sight advantage so that they can't get hit as much. Getting them back up to like anywhere between 25 to 50% health when they're about to die could be very clutch. So definitely do it, even if other people get annoyed. Just do it. Just do it. But don't be annoying with it. Don't spam it all the time. Just try to use it and be clutch with it. Use it sparingly. Make good decisions with it. Polarity Shift. Incredibly important ability. Basically need to be using it on cooldown. It's a little, not necessarily on cooldown, but you want to use it very, very, very often. It's only got a 2-minute cooldown, so you need to be using it often. Not necessarily on cooldown, but very often. Pretty much on cooldown. What it does is your connection to the force shifts, granting 20% alacrity and immunity to pushback and interrupts for 15 seconds. 15 seconds is a very, very, very long time. Renewal, our next passive. 1 second after refreshing your resurgence on a target, the target will be healed for 4,000 health, plus any healing that remained from the previous resurgence. This is fantastic. So essentially, when you use your resurgence, it's going to go on cooldown, which has got about a 6-second cooldown depending on your alacrity. When you heal again on the same target, it'll heal you the remaining and refresh. So this is your bread. If Roaming Mend is your butter, Resurgence is your bread. You want to be spreading this on cooldown constantly on everything all the time. Resurgence on cooldown constantly, no matter what, be throwing that. Expunge, another ability kind of like Extrication, doesn't get utilized enough in PvP from what I've seen. It cleanses a friendly target of up to 2 negative mental or force effects. So when you start seeing your teammates get a big stack of a bunch of debuffs, just start throwing Expunge on them. That'll clear up some of the big dots that the enemy team is throwing onto your teammates and make their survivability so much higher. Instead of trying to heal through a bunch of different dots and stuff, you can just clear them off, and then your healing over time abilities will be able to tick more and you'll get more bang for your buck. So use this pretty much on cooldown because there's enough debuff specs out there that if you can cleanse some of those debuffs on your teammates, the enemy team's DPS is just gonna dwindle quite a bit because they need their debuffs in order to do parts of their rotation. That's big parts of their damage. So expunging that, you can be super annoying to those dot specs, which aren't super common, but there's a lot of debuffs going around. So Expunge, basically want to be using that on cooldown. Innervate, very important heal. Resurgence and Roaming Men are going to be your big ones. Next up is going to be Innervate. You're going to be wanting to throw Innervates around basically on cooldown as well. Heals a friendly target for X health and consumes 60 force over the channel duration. Innervate channels and ticks 10% faster. Just a little added info. Very great heal. Channels over the duration. But what this does, it also gives you Consuming Darkness procs. And I'll explain more about that right now because Consuming Darkness is up next. Convenient. So when you innervate, it's going to give you stacks where your Consuming Darkness starts to glow, which is nice. It's called a proc. Consumes the dark energy around you, restoring 40 force. Utilizing Consuming Darkness makes you weary, reducing your force regeneration rate by 2 for 10 seconds. This effect can stack up to 4 times. Your force regeneration rate can really get nerfed by up to 8 times where you're not gaining any force back whenever you use it. So if you just use Consuming Darkness, you're going to get a little debuff down here. Force regeneration rate decreased, weary. So we want to avoid getting those stacks. To avoid getting those stacks, you're going to want to use your Innervate, and then you'll get a proc like that whenever, I think it's whenever your Innervate critical hits. So what that does is now that it's procced, you can click it and you get your force back. You get 40 points of force back, but you're not going to get the debuff. So basically whenever this is procced, you're going to want to be using it, because if you just start spamming all of your heals, you're going to run out of force very, very quickly. So whenever you've got your Innervate up, you might be able to wait a little bit and get some more heals off, throw your Dark Infusions, start healing like crazy, your force is going to start getting really low. See, I'm already at 75%, but if I keep it up, I'm going to run out of force. But sprinkling in your Consuming Darkness as you go, look, I'm already at max force again. You just got to sprinkle it in there and during your rotation. Remember, it's proactive and reactive healing. It's all going to be situational, which abilities you use and when, and that'll be in part 3. So just stick around for that. But keep in mind, if you're having force issues as a healer, you need to be sprinkling in Consuming Darkness when you have the procs. So keep an eye on that. Affliction, it's your just dot, an instant cast dot damage over time. Cast a powerful force affliction upon the target that deals X internal damage over 18 seconds. So it doesn't do a lot of damage fast, but it does a lot of damage over a lot of time. So if the enemy team isn't doing all that much damage, just throw this affliction on targets around. If you have nothing else to do, just throw affliction around. Doesn't hurt. There you go. Unnatural Preservation immediately restores X amount of health to you. Cannot be used on others. This needs to be used on cooldown, essentially. Once you get to less than 80% health or so, just start using Unnatural Preservation. It doesn't cost any force. It doesn't respect any global cooldowns. You can just use it whenever it's ready. So that's just extra healing to yourself, so you don't have to worry about wasting any of your force or heals on yourself. Use it on cooldown once you're below like 80% health or so. Electric Induction, our next passive ability, reduces the force consumed by force abilities by 10%. Level 27, you get it, and it just makes it so that you're not spending as much force to do your abilities. Simple, nothing crazy. Cloud Mind, very good ability. You'll pick it up in the ability tree. Wipes your enemy's thoughts, instantly lowering your threat by a moderate amount. That part alone doesn't matter at all for PvP, so don't worry about threat. Doesn't mean a thing in PvP. The big part is that it increases your damage reduction by 25% for 6 seconds. 25% is a huge amount. Anybody doing any damage to you is going to be doing 25% less of it for 6 seconds. You almost want to use this on cooldown, but I would not use it unless you're starting to be forced. So if you're noticing people starting to attack you, 1 or 2 people, 2 or 3 people starting to focus on you, you want to pop this as soon as you possibly can. So if you're noticing that you're getting targeted, you want to pop this immediately. 2 or 3 people start shooting at you, 1 or 2 people start shooting at you, throw it right up front, because you want to maximize the amount of time that this is on cooldown, because the cooldown is only 45 seconds, so you can spam this pretty often. So you basically want this on cooldown, but if you're not taking damage, don't use it. But the moment you start taking damage, you want to get it up as soon as you possibly can. For speed, I love force speed. It's very fun. Increases movement speed by 150% for 2 seconds. Very simple. You just meow, meow, like a bullet, you know? Nothing crazy. We'll go into what force speed does later on when I get to tacticals and implants and such. But you basically want to be using it on cooldown. I'll explain why later on, because there are certain tacticals and implants that can increase some properties of your rotation. So when using it, it actually reduces the cooldown of your polarity shift, and you want to be using polarity shift quite often. Crushing Darkness summons a dark cloud of energy to crush the target, instantly dealing X kinetic damage and an additional X kinetic damage over 6 seconds. So this along with Affliction is generally, if you're wanting to add any extra damage during PvP, it's not super often that you're going to want to be throwing out damage. More often than not, you're just going to want to be healing. But if you have time and the enemy team just isn't doing all that much damage and you just want to try to kill people fast, you'll want to be using Affliction and Crushing Darkness. Those are the first two abilities you want to be using. Unless there's a big group, whereas later you can use Force Storm to do a bunch of AoE damage. Regardless, I would still recommend just focusing single target damage with Crushing Darkness and Affliction, generally doing a lot more damage to one person than spreading out a bunch of damage in PvP. At least in PvP, is much more effective. Resurgence immediately heals the target for X plus an additional X over the 15 seconds. So remember, this is the bread. This is what you want to be using on cooldown, giving to everyone that you possibly can. But if you use it on the same target twice, it's very good because it'll heal the remaining amount and it'll refresh it. Very good, very good. This is your bread. You want to be throwing this out on cooldown. Just constantly Resurgence all the time. Throwing them around like crazy. Jolt interrupts the target's current action and prevents that ability from being used for 4 seconds. This is just an interrupt. If you see somebody like a melee DPS or even a ranged DPS, if you're in range, is doing a big cast on you or using one of their big abilities, you might have a chance to use Jolt, and it'll interrupt them so they won't be doing that damage, because keep in mind, no damage being done is better than healing. So any damage that you can prevent, similar idea with damage reduction, the less damage dealt, the less you have to heal. The less you have to heal, the better job of a healer you're being. So keep that in mind. Preventing damage and reducing damage is just as effective, if not as effective, as healing a bunch. It prevents them from using that ability for 4 seconds, so it might throw them off in their rotation. It might throw their whole rotation off, so they're not able to put out as much damage. So using this whenever you get the opportunity is really great, especially if you're starting to get chased around and focused a lot, which as a healer, that's gonna happen. You are the target for people. So having this readily available and interrupting the opponents that jump on you and start to try to attack you is very good. It can be kind of hard to judge when to use it in PvP, but it is helpful. Recklessness grants 2 charges of Recklessness, which increases the force critical chance of your direct attacks and heals by 60%. Each time a direct force ability critically hits, or each time a channeled force ability is activated, 1 charge is consumed, and this lasts for 20 seconds. So you can click it, you've got Recklessness on, you've got 20 seconds to start using abilities, which hopefully it doesn't take you that long to start using abilities. What it does is it gives you a higher chance to critically hit with your abilities. So what I like to do is I'll throw Recklessness off. If I'm in really dire straits, I will go for an Innervate, and then I'll give me like basically guaranteed crits on it so that I can guaranteed get Consuming Darkness back, so I can get some more force back. So when you're in an oh crap situation, use your Recklessness and then use your Innervate, and you'll get guaranteed stacks, pretty much. Basically guaranteed, 60% it's gonna happen. So that way you can get some guaranteed force back if you're in that situation. More often than not, I'll recommend using Recklessness and then using Dark Infusion. And once we get to the ability tree, you'll be able to use Dark Infusion as a free cast again. an immediate cast instead of having to channel it again. So what I'll do is I'll use it, and then I'll use Dark Infusion, basically a guaranteed crit, and then I'll use the Dark Infusion again, and it'll basically be another auto crit. So you'll get 2 of your biggest heals off, boom, boom, really quick, and they're both almost guaranteed crits. So it's very, very good big heals. So using that in conjunction with, even with Polarity Shift is very good. So you use Polarity Shift, Recklessness, and then you'll use your Dark Infusions, boom, boom, 2 big heals. And then you'll even have Dark Heal that'll get a proc after your Dark Infusion, which will give it an instant cast as well as other benefits. So 3 of your biggest heals all within like 2 seconds, which is very, very clutch. So keep that in mind. Static Barrier. Surrounds the target in a lightning shield that lasts up to 30 seconds and absorbs X damage. The target becomes deionized and cannot benefit from static barrier again for 15 seconds. Reduces the force consumed by static barrier by 15 and reduces the duration of deionized by 5 seconds. Additionally, increases the amount of damage absorbed by your static barrier by 10%. This ability is worded very weird. Basically, the second half of that whole paragraph is just telling you what the ability does in very weird terms. It's not any other added tree stuff that I picked. It's just the way it's worded in the ability. But essentially, you want to be throwing your Resurgence and your roaming mends around as often as possible. Static Barrier is kind of like a oh crap button for your teammates. If they're starting to get really low and all your big heals or all of your bread and butter abilities are on cooldown and you need to just maybe get out a few more seconds, you'll want to like target that teammate that's down to like 10%, 20% health. If you're just in a very tight crunch of time where they're about to die, you can throw this off and that might give them 2 or 3 seconds for either your other healers to be able to help out or for him to get out of there. This is kind of just like instead of your self bubble, your force barrier, this is kind of what you would do as like a last ditch. Oh, maybe they'll be able to survive. You can throw that on them. And, but yeah, that's very situational. It's better to be throwing off your other abilities out. Dark Mending. Next passive on the list reduces the activation time of Dark Infusion by 0.5 seconds and the force consumed by Dark Heal by 5. Level 15. Just a little buff to your abilities, nothing crazy there. Dark Infusion, this is the ability that you're going to be spreading around the most when your other abilities are on cooldown. So you throw your Resurgence, then your Roaming Mend off, and you got your Innervate going to get your stacks. And then once these are all on cooldown, Resurgence will probably be up by the time Innervate's over, but then you'll want to start throwing Dark Infusions around. And then your Dark Heal, once it procs, and then everything will have been reset. You'll want to be throwing Revivification in there as well later on, but again, it's going to be very situational to what's going on. And keep in mind that Revivification is a heal over time. It doesn't heal anything immediately. So you need to be a little more proactive with your Revivification. And that's your AoE heal. Like this puts the big purple pool on the ground. And you only really want to be using Revivification if it's affecting more than 2 or 3 targets. So Revivification is one of your best heals in the game, but you won't want to be using it all the time. It's going to be a little more situational, and that'll be part 3. Electrocute. Electrocutes the target, dealing X amount of energy damage and stunning it for 4 seconds. Very important, kind of like the Interrupt Jolt. You want to be using this on targets that are really just bothering you, because again, preventing damage for 4 seconds is better than healing for 4 seconds because you're not using as much force. You're preventing damage, which is just better than healing. So keep that in mind. You'll want to basically be using this on cooldown, but I would save it for situations where you're getting focused, usually by an incessant assassin, shadow, or sentinel, or marauder. Usually they'll just be jumping on you like crazy. You'll want to use this and then try to get away, try to force speed away, try to get behind other line of sight opportunities, something like that, you know, so that you have a chance to get away and heal. Plus it's fun to just like stun people, right? Everybody loves that. Unbreakable Will. Summons an Unbreakable Will, immediately purging, incapacitating, and movement impairing effects. There is a system in the game called the Resolve system. On your character portrait, there will be a bar that appears on your character once you start taking knockbacks or if you get stunned or slowed. Once the meter fully fills, it'll turn white and begin slowly depleting. Once it turns white and slowly depletes, that's when you're going to want to use your Unbreakable Will, because then you can't be stunned anymore for that brief amount of time. So then you're maximizing freeing yourself and moving and impairing stuff. There will be situations where you'll get stunned and your resolve meter is not fully filled, and at that point you're going to want to Unbreakable Will only and only when it could save either someone's life, save your life to get you to a situation where you can get away, or so you can break yourself free from the stun, phase walk out of there, things like that. There'll be situations where your resolve bar is not full and you'll use it, but it's going to be based on decision making of what's happening around you. General rule of thumb, wait for your resolve bar to fully fill so that it's depleting when it's white until you use your stun break. Force Storm calls down a force storm over the target area, consuming 60 force and dealing X energy damage to up to 8 targets within 8 meters over the duration of the channel. Standard and weak targets have a 33% chance to be stunned by the storm each second. Standard and weak targets are not going to apply in PvP, so you're not going to be stunning anybody in the storm. It's just going to do some damage. To an entire squad of 8 though. So if everybody's grouping up and there's all 8 of the enemy team sitting on each other, do it. Perfect time to do it, because that's a lot of AoE damage. So if you see like 3, 4, 5 people all clumped up together melee DPS, it's good to throw that off, but keep in mind it's a channel, so you have to wait for it to tick the entire time. You can't be healing in the meantime. More than likely you're going to be wanting to focus on healing. So, but if the enemy team's not doing much damage and your team is fine, it's good to just throw this down to throw extra DPS. Dark Heal heals a friendly target for X health. It's the same as your Dark Infusion, it's just a faster cast with less healing. You'll never really want to be using Dark Heal, you'll want to be using Dark Infusion, but after using Dark Infusion, you'll get a Dark Heal proc. So Dark Infusion, and then my Dark Heal procced. And what that does is it gives me an instant cast Dark Heal, and it doesn't cost any force either. So that's really nice. So every time you use a Dark Heal or a Dark Infusion, you'll want to be using an immediately after that Dark Heal. So that's good. So on your hotbar, I like to use my mouse button, and then I'll use a shift of the same mouse button to get the Dark Heal off. So that way I can just be spamming this ability, and then right when I know my infusion's done, I'll be able to immediately just hold shift down and click the same button. Makes it quick and easy for me. Force Lightning deals X energy damage to the target and consumes 40 force over the duration of the channel. Also slows the movement speed of the target by 50%. And it immobilizes weak and standard enemies. Again, weak and standard enemies is only for PvE. That's not going to apply to PvP, but you will get a 50% slow on other players, which can be very clutch, especially in objective-based war zones. If somebody is capping a door, you might be able to force lightning someone just enough so that they can't get to the cap to stop your teammate from capping. So it's worth using in that regard. Remember, being a good teammate is just as important, if not more, than just getting high healing numbers. Does general damage. I like to use it to prevent enemy players from capturing objectives. Use it whenever. It's going to be situational, and we'll go over some more of that in part 3. Overload. You'll pick this up in the ability tree. Very important for healers to grab. Deals X energy damage and knocks back up to 8 enemies within a 15-meter cone in front of you, binding them in electricity and immobilizing them for 5 seconds. Standard and weak enemies are additionally knocked down for 3 seconds. Direct damage dealt after 2 seconds ends the immobilize effect prematurely. So what you're going to be doing is, if people are running up on you, trying to do a bunch of damage to you, you got to face in their general direction, use it, it'll knock them back, and they won't be able to do, especially if they're melee, they won't be able to do as much damage to you because they're not right up next to you. That ought to give you a chance to, once you knock them back, be able to run to a different position, get behind a line of sight of some sort, be able to heal yourself up or your teammates up. Very clutch. Very clutch. So overload is good. It's also good for preventing the enemy team from capturing things or planting bombs. You can just kind of run up and like knock a whole group of people back, or it does a little bit of damage. It's quick in an AoE. As a sorcerer, especially corruption, this is really your only quick way to do AoE damage. You can use your Force Storm to do AoE damage to prevent multiple people from capping, but once you click it, it takes a second for the first tick to actually do damage. So using overload is faster and more immediate if you need to be quicker in reaction to prevent a cap. So keep that in mind. It's what I usually use first to prevent caps. Weapon proficiency, vibro swords, can skip that. Lightning strike, it's just a charged DPS ability. It shoots a zap of lightning. You'll never really want to be using this. You probably don't even need it on your hotbar, but if for whatever reason the enemy team is just not doing any damage, you can throw it on your hotbar. It'll be kind of your filler ability as far as your DPS rotation goes. Shock. This is very good for preventing caps or preventing bomb plants or anything like that. It's just a quick instant cast damaging ability for an X amount of damage. Does a decent amount of damage too. So I'd want to throw this on a hotkey. I've got it on Shift V for me right now. So if somebody's capping something and like I can barely get there in time, this is probably, other than overload, it's got a little bit more of a range, 30-meter range. You'll just use that to just do some extra little damage and prevent caps and stuff on objectives. So it's worth having on your hotbar because it does a decent amount of damage as well. Armor proficiency, can skip that. Our next passive is Transmission. Increases the range of shock, jolt, death field, and force slow by 20 meters. Also increases the duration of whirlwind by 60 seconds. Extra range on your shock so that you can prevent objectives from even further away. Jolt as well, which is your interrupt. So that's very good. Other than that, doesn't really do much for you. So nothing crazy. Whirlwind, probably not going to be using it in PvP much. I suggest taking phase walk anyways. It's a little bit better. So doesn't really do much, not a crazy passive. Move on. Saber strike, just don't even keep it on your toolbar. It's just a melee attack with your lightsaber, very basic, doesn't really do anything. So just move on. Don't even throw it on the hotbar, it's pointless. It's better to just use some of your lightning abilities. Seath, that's when you're out of combat, you can just heal yourself up. There are other items in the game that do that as well, like my push-ups. Yes, I am swole. Mark of Power. Increases mastery by 5%, internal and elemental damage reduction by 10%. This used to be a buff that you would have to cast, and it would give you all of the abilities of your legacy that you've completed the class story to. They have since changed it to it's just a passive where only you can get you can still get all the legacy buffs of the characters that you've completed the class stories with. You can still get all their buffs for yourself, but you can't give them to your teammates anymore, which I think that's pretty lame. But it is what it is. It's still a passive. You'll just always have it on your buff bar next to your name. Nothing crazy, just buffs to make everything a little better for you. Dark Lifebender reduces the cooldown of revive by 100%. Dark Lifebender is not going to matter in PvP, so we can move on. Weapon proficiency, moving on. Force attunement, you just got more force. Cool. So now let's move to the ability tree. All right, part 2. We're going to start from the bottom and we're going to work our way up, reading through each ability. Some of them I've already covered in the first part, so we'll kind of skip through it. For example, right up front, Static Barrier, we get it at level 15, went over that. Dark Infusion, we get it as well, we've been over that. The first passive we're going to be getting at the beginning at level 15 is Lucidity. It reduces the pushback suffered while activating healing abilities by 75% and lowers the threat generation of healing abilities by 10%. The second half of that, it's not going to matter for PvP, but 75% reduction to your abilities being pushed back when you're taking damage when you're full casting is really great. Most of your abilities that you're going to be casting though are instant casts, but there are a couple like Dark Infusion and Enervate that can get messed with. Enervate shouldn't get messed with because it's a channel, but a full cast of like your Dark Infusion can be slowed down with pushbacks, but this reduces that, which is a really good feature. The first tier of selections available is at level 23. I'm just going to go through which options I picked for PvP to make this a little quicker for you guys. The first choice I recommend making is Haste. After casting Dark Infusion, you are granted Haste, making your next Dark Infusion instant. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. I like to take this over the other two because single target healing can happen more often than not than needing to do more area healing. More often than not, the enemy team is going to pick a target and focus on the target. More often than not, it's going to be you too. So being able to get more instant casts and faster, bigger single target heals, I think is very important for PvP. So I take Haste. Force Bending. This is your first passive at level 23. Your Resurgent grants Force Bending for up to 15 seconds, which increases the effect of your next healing ability. So these are very important to keep in mind. Every time you throw off Resurgent onto a target, this is going to proc for yourself. So this is where decision making and reaction proactive decision making is going to come into play on how to be an effective healer, not necessarily just a number pusher. It all starts kind of right here. Dark Heal, critical chance increased by 60%. Pretty good for Dark Heal, but more often than not, you're not going to be casting Dark Heal. The only time you'll be casting it is after you cast a Dark Infusion. Right up next after that, Dark Infusion, the activation time is reduced by 0.5 seconds. That's very, very, very good. Whenever you cast a Resurgence, and then if you cast Dark Infusion next, so if you were to go R and then cast your Dark Infusion, it's going to cast significantly faster, almost 25% faster, more than likely. So that's a very good option. Innervate, the critical chance increases by 25%. This is very, very good. So you throw your Resurgence off and then you Innervate, you have a higher % chance for your Consuming Darkness to proc, because it only procs when you get a crit with Innervate. So Resurgence into an Innervate is very, very good because you'll be able to replenish your force more, because if you run out of your force, you're not doing any healing. So you want to make sure your force levels are staying up. You can start to let it get a little bit lower before you start focusing on Corruption Darkness procs, because you'll usually get it back and PvP fights don't last all that long. But keep an eye on your force, and keep in mind using Resurgence into Innervate is very good to start recuperating your force if you're starting to get low. Revivification is the next on the list. So if you cast Resurgence, your next Revivification will be instant. Basically, anytime I feel like I want to be using Revivification, if you've got a lot of allies that are grouped up and bunched up, it's good to just throw one down. So target your friendly target that's on your team that's starting to take some damage. I like to be proactive with my Revivification because it is a heal over time. It's not like a instant heal, but I will throw off a Resurgence really quickly, and then you'll have an instant cast of your puddle. So this will give AoE heals, but I like to do this right up front before a fight starts. I'll explain decision making again in part 3, but essentially I'll just start basically every fight with a Resurgence just on who is most likely to be taking the damage, whoever's in the front, and then I'll throw off of a Revivification to try to soak as many of my teammates as I can right before a fight starts. That way, right when they start taking damage, it's already starting to tick and you're maximizing it. Roaming Mend immediately roams to and heals each target without waiting for the target to take damage first. This is very, very good. More often than not, you'll want to be using Resurgence and then Roaming Mend immediately. Immediately roams to and heals each target without waiting for the target to take damage first, because that's how Roaming Mend works. The only time it's going to switch off of the target that it's on is if they take damage. So say you've got a bunch of teammates taking that have taken a bunch of damage, you'll want to throw Resurgence, and then you'll want to use Roaming Mend because it'll automatically bounce to everything and it'll get your heals out there quicker. You won't have to wait for the heals to be ticking. So more often than not, throw Roaming Mend out right after your Resurgence. But every now and then, when you start running low on force, you'll want to Resurgence, and then you'll want to Innervate so that you can get those crits happening so that you can Consuming Darkness to get your force back. Next up, the tree. The choice I recommend is Cloud Mine because, again, it gives you that 25% damage reduction for 6 seconds. So when you're starting to take a bunch of damage, you click that, you're taking a quarter of it for 6 seconds, and it's got a 45-second cooldown, so you can use it fairly often. It's very good. There are 2 other options that you can pick. The first one being Dark Speed. Dark Heal increases the movement speed of the target by 50% for 6 seconds, but it can't occur for more than 12 seconds. Not that great. Dark Heal has a 50% chance to cause your resurgence to tick twice. This is going to increase your overall healing potential. It can be useful. It depends on your team and what's going on, but more often than not, you're going to be the target of the enemy team. So having a 25% damage reduction on that short of a cooldown is very important because the longer you're alive, the more you can heal. But overall, just raw healing, if you just want more numbers, you can go with this because your resurgence will just kind of have a buff. It'll just heal more, but it's only a 50% chance for it to even proc. So it's like a guaranteed 25% damage reduction versus a 50% chance to just like heal a little bit more, not even all that much more. The damage reduction is way better for PvP. Trust me. Purity buffs your expunge, which is your debuff removal. It removes negative physical effects and it heals the target for a little bit. The target also increases force critical chance and damage reduction by 3%, which is really nice, really nice. Increases force, critical chance, and damage reduction by 3%. So again, like I said before, you'll want to basically be using this on cooldown. More often than not, you'll see the debuffs appear on your teammates. It's better to just get those debuffs off and then start healing. Next step up, I go with Corrupted Bastion. Innervate builds stacks of Corrupted Bastion. Each stack increases the healing done by Dark Heal, Rally, or Dark Infusion by 3% per stack with a max of 3 stacks. So if your Innervate channels all the way through, you have a 9% increase to your Dark Infusion heal. So if you couple that with your Recklessness to get, like I said earlier, the Dark Infusions to crit, you can get back-to-back crits at almost 10% extra healing than you would normally get from the Dark Infusion. So that's usually how I like to use it. Polarity Shift increasing the healing done by Innervate by 3% is also good, but I think just overall, the Innervate and the 3% boost, or almost 9% boost most of the time to your Dark Infusions is just general better. It's going to be situational though. Polarity Shift might be better for ranked arenas, but these are pretty interchangeable. I would go with whatever you feel more comfortable with, but Polarity Shift is not always on. And the cooldown is rather long. It's 2-minute cooldown, so it's not going to be up all that often. Whereas this is constantly. Corrupted Bastion is just constantly going because you're innervating all the time. So I just feel like it's generally better. Next up, I go with Death's Embrace. If a friendly player has Resurgence applied to them and are killed during the duration of Resurgence, your next reanimation, rally, or Dark Infusion is instant. So you're getting your big heal for free if your teammate dies while they have Resurgence on them. So a good thing to do is if you know somebody's going down, just throw a Resurgence on them. Doesn't matter. It's not a waste. You're going to get a benefit to your next Dark Infusion. So that's good. You can get the raid buff. It's only 10 seconds long. It's not going to make or break anything. I think Death's Embrace is just better, just general better healing. Unhindered Resolve. This is where the argument I would make in ranked PvP or in arenas. I think Unhindered Resolve is going to be a lot better. Channeling Innervate grants a stack of Unhindered Resolve. Each stack grants a 2% damage reduction per stack, max of 3 stacks. So you can have almost constantly up most of the time, unless they interrupt your Innervate, an extra 6% damage reduction, which is really, really, really good if you're being focused a lot. In Warzones, I think it's probably just a little better to just have the Dark Infusions, more Dark Infusions being able to be instant casts. And you also get the buffs on your Force Barrier and stuff, and your Extrication reduced. Just overall quality of life for Warzones is a little better, I feel like, with Death's Embrace. But in ranked PvP and in arenas, I feel like this is going to be better because as the healer, you're going to be the target. They're going after you first. So as much damage reduction as you can get, I'd recommend that. But these two, pick one. Both are good. You're not going to see too much of a difference, but I like being able to just heal a little bit more because in Warzones, you're not always going to be the primary target. More often than not, especially in AD PvP, they'll start to pick up that you're the healer and you'll start to get focused as soon as you get there. And in that case, you may want to just get the damage reduction anyways, but it just depends. It's very situational. Revivification's the next step. Our next passive at level 43 is increases the duration of Resurgence by 6 seconds. Very good, just a solid buff. In addition, Resurgence grants protection to its targets for 45 seconds. Protected targets have their armor rating increased by 10%. Very good. Another reason why you need to just be spreading the love with Resurgence on basically everyone you can. They're just 10% tankier. Pretty crazy. After refreshing your Resurgence on a target, the target will receive a heal plus any healing that remained from their previous Resurgence, kind of like what we covered earlier. So on cooldown, Resurgence, you just want, that's your bread. You throw it everywhere. Give it out to everyone as much as you can. On cooldown, on cooldown. Revivification, that's your AoE heal. We went over that. The next choice I would pick is Force Mobility. Thundering Blast, most importantly, Innervate, and Force Leech may be activated while moving. So now you can run around while using your Innervate. You don't have to stand in one spot to be using it, which I think is incredibly important because being able to move and not standing in one spot makes it harder for people to not only interrupt you, but makes it harder for them to just do damage and keep up with you in general, especially melee DPS. Very, very good. You can make an argument for damage reduction by 3%. It's going to depend on how good your teammates are at peeling for you. So this might vary a little bit in ranked PvP or arenas if you're going in with a team. But generally, just being able to move while using your Innervate is just such a huge quality of life. It just makes the healing not only more fun, it helps you reposition and get behind line of sight and stuff better. It just keeps you more mobile. You've also got the static barrier crackling with energy and shocking attackers when it absorbs direct damage to you. It just does some damage whenever you use static barrier, but static barrier isn't really part of your bread and butter. Not all that great. I recommend Force Mobility for sure. It just makes healing so much better and easier. Roaming Mend, we've been over that. Penetrating Darkness is just a little passive on the side, increases the critical chance of Dark Heal by 10%, and increases the healing done by Resurgence by 10%. Just overall healing buff, nothing crazy. The next passive is Enervate. Critical heals grant a charge of Forcing Surge, stacking up to 3 times. Using Consuming Darkness with Force Surge consumes the charge, restores 5 additional force, and does not make you weary. So like I said, you throw out your Resurgence, and then you throw out your Enervate. It gives you stacks of Consuming Darkness because your Enervate's going to crit more often if the next ability you use after Resurgence is Enervate, giving you the stacks of Consuming Darkness. You want to throw these in there whenever you can, really, but you can let your force get down to like 40-50% before you start worrying about throwing the Consuming Darkness into your rotation. More often than not, in PvP, fights aren't going to last long enough where you're going to be draining all of your force. But just keep an eye on your force. If you start getting close to like the 50% mark, start throwing Consuming Darkness into your global cooldown rotation. Next up is Unnatural Vigor. Unnatural Preservation increases your damage reduction by 15% for 6 seconds. Additionally, reduces the cooldown of Unnatural Preservation by 5 seconds. This is your self-heal. So now whenever you use your self-heal that you're using basically on cooldown, which is every 25 seconds, which is very often, by the way, you can use it constantly. You get to about 80% health, throw off your Natural Preservation. Now you're taking 15% less damage as well. So you're constantly just 15% tankier, and then you stack that with your Cloud Mind, you're tanky. So as soon as a Sentinel or an Assassin starts unloading on you, throw off your Cloud Mind. As soon as you take enough damage to fully utilize your heal, about 80-85%, use your Unnatural Preservation, and then the first half of a Sentinel or an Assassin's rotation is doing 50% damage. So their whole initial open up is just not doing anything to you, hardly, or at least half as much to you. So that's very, very, very clutch. So keep that in mind. You got to be quick with those. So as soon as you see like a Sentinel or a Marauder jumping on you, right over to you, or coming out of an assassin coming out of stealth and starts wailing into you, pop both of those immediately as soon as you can, because the initial burst is always going to be the hardest hitting, because they're trying to catch you off on catch you by surprise. So throw those damage reductions off immediately. Super good buff for your self heal. These other ones can be useful, but the 15% damage reduction, 15% is just such a large amount for 6 seconds, and reducing the cooldown by 5 seconds is just huge. I would just, a natural vigor, just super good, super good. Next up, phase walk. I've already basically explained how that works, but you'll put the phase walk down in a inconspicuous area. Now you've got a whole fight going on over here. You're healing everybody over here. They start jumping on you. You're getting down to low health. You hit phase walk again, and then you disappear. They have no idea where you went. Gives you a chance to refresh, recuperate, get back in there while they swap targets. I like to do that before I use my force barrier. Say you've already done that, you get back into the fight. You can't phase walk again, still on cooldown. That's when you'll be able to use your force barrier when you're about to die. That's when you'll want to be using that very last ditch effort. Utilize your phase walk. I don't see a lot of people as healers utilizing it. So do that. Next up is immersion. Force speed grants immersion, removing all movement impairing effects and granting immunity to them for the duration. Super important as a healer because, like I said, 90% of the time, everybody's going to be trying to focus on you. If they're damaged, knows what they're doing at least. Basically, this almost works like a stun break, but you'll be able to get away from people that are trying to stun lock you to finish you off. It'll help you in hut ball matches. If you're carrying the ball, they won't be able to like slow you down and mess with you during its duration. It's very good. There is an argument to be made for corrupted flesh. It just reduces all damage taken from periodic effects by 15%. Just a little bit more damage reduction. I've found that movement impairing effects, there's just so many of them in the game that cutting that down a little bit is just so helpful. Especially, it just makes the game that much more playable as well. Not being knocked around nearly as much, being able to stop some of that and prevent it. Always good. But 15% less damage from dots and stuff could be useful. It's going to depend. You might be able to make more arguments for this in some ranked PvP. It's all going to depend on your team at that point. We can do a more in-depth like ranked guide in a future video if we'd liked, but this is just general PvP. Targets affected by affliction are slowed by 30%. This can be very good because affliction lasts quite a while. So 30% slow on somebody for that amount of time can be very good. But as a healer, I think just giving yourself more mobility and freedom to get around is just better. So I recommend immersion. Some of the final few passives: Crushing Darkness, Lightning Strike, Dark Infusion, and Revivification grant Dark Concentration, which causes your next Dark Heal to activate instantly, consumes no force, and heal for 50% more. So, like we were saying earlier, you throw off your Dark Infusion, you get an auto proc of your Dark Heal. It also works off of Revivification, so whenever you use your big puddle pool of healing or your Dark Infusion, which is your long cast heal, you want to immediately just throw a Dark Heal right off of that because you get a big boost to your Dark Heal and it's an instant cast, doesn't cost anything, just extra healing. So whenever you throw that pool down or you do your big Dark Infusion heal, throw an immediate Dark Heal after that. And that's about the only time you're ever going to be using Dark Heal. Reverse Corruptions. Force Barrier now purges the weary effect caused by consuming darkness. Very good. So when you use your big Force Barrier last ditch effort to survive, it's going to get rid of all your stacks of weary if you have any. You probably shouldn't have any if you utilize your innervate procs properly. So if you only use it while it's glowing like that, you shouldn't even have to worry about that. In addition, spending a charge of Force Surge on Consuming Darkness grants Reverse Corruptions, increasing your force regeneration rate by 2 for up to 10 seconds if you are not weary or removing a single tack of weary otherwise. The Reverse Corruptions effect will be lost early if Consuming Darkness is activated without a charge of Force Surge. Second half of that rarely is going to apply. More often than not, you're just going to be healing, but you get a little bonus to your Crushing Darkness. Nothing crazy other than that. The last passive, Static Barrier grants 10 charges of Sustaining Darkness to the target. Targets with the Sustaining Darkness will lose a charge of it each time you directly heal them. If Static Barrier concludes early, the target is healed for 1424 health per remaining charge of Sustaining Darkness. So basically, whenever you put a bubble on someone, they've got a bubble on them, and the ability works as normal. If they never take damage while they've got the bubble on, and you didn't heal them at all, they're going to get a big heal once the bubble ends, which is pretty nice. So essentially, once you put the bubble on someone, you don't really want to be healing them anymore. You'll want to put the Static Barrier on them, and you want to focus healing on other people. That way, you're not reducing the charges of the stack that they have. So that way they get the maximized heal after the bubble is used. Now I'm going to show you guys a little bit of gameplay from a solid PvP match, and I'll kind of pause the video and give you my thoughts of what my decision making is and my play-by-play for an average Warzone is going to be. Every situation is going to be different. Every Warzone is going to be a little bit different of how you're going to approach it, but I'm going to show you footage of a recent game that I just played that was a solid game, able to get the top DPS, some clutch heals, some good choice moments, and I'll try to highlight exactly how I approach my healing to be an efficient healer, an effective healer, not necessarily just a number puncher. You want to be a good teammate, and to be a good teammate, you need to be focusing on objectives, you need to be healing well, but you need to be strategically making good decisions on when to heal and how to heal, not just trying to push out as much numbers as you can. High numbers are great, but keep in mind, winning the game is the most important thing, because to get your dailies and to get your weeklies, you have to have wins. And in order to do that, you can't just be standing in one spot free casting abilities, which more often than not, especially at level 80, you're not going to be able to because you're going to be focused. You're the healer. But keep that in mind. The highest numbers aren't necessarily the best healers. It's a good sign that they know what they're doing, but more often than not, it's better to be useful and doing objectives and stuff and focusing on that than just like spamming heals. So keep that in mind. But let's jump into Warzone. All right, I've got a Warzone pulled up from a recent match that I did live on stream. I'm just going to be doing some play-by-play of kind of what my decision-making is, and I'll kind of pause so I can kind of reflect on my thought process that's all swimming around up in my head, and I don't really like do a super good job of what I'm doing live. So, because I'm thinking about it, you know. But let's jump into it and see how this goes. One, maybe two, but we'll see. So it doesn't look like they're sending anyone. I mean, there could be a stealth there, but... Okay, right up front, I go ahead and throw down my phase walk. My teammate actually did right over here as well, but I'm throwing mine kind of right here because when it's around this corner, it's also good. But I just need to get around the corner enough so that once I get back over here, more often than not, they're going to change targets to someone else, and it helps that I can get back to my teammates faster. Rather than putting it like way over here, I'd put it a little closer to the side, obviously out of visual of the enemy team, so around this side of the wall, but not so far that it takes a second for you to get all the way back over here to be able to get back to healing your teammates. Just enough to get out of vision. You could always run back over this way if you really wanted to, but this makes it so you can get back into the fight a little quicker, I find. So it starts off, and it's smart that I start off right behind this middle object. Anything in any sort of war zone like this is going to be great. Make sure you're staying in the line of sight where people can't target you easily and start shooting you from the door. Because if I was standing somewhere over here, like where this guy is standing, he's going to be the main target of what everybody's going to be going after. Because you can see they're already all starting to aim him, not only because he's closer, but because he's like right up front and easy to see. So they're going to be weighing on him. You can already see some debuffs starting to stack on him. I'm going to go ahead and try to start purging up and resurgencing up to give him some shields, because I know he's about to get nuked. So I want to proactively heal him a little bit so that once he starts taking more damage, he'll my healing over time will start to do healing over time. But keep that in mind as a healer, you don't want to be like all up front. You want to be in the back and let your teammates be the focus of the targets, because eventually they're going to jump on you anyways, but make sure you're kind of standing off to the side so you're not the attention, bringing the attention to yourself. Yes, he's taking all the damage. That's why his health isn't going up too much, but look how satisfying this is. Look at his health. Look at it replenish. It's so satisfying. So I saw all of my teammates kind of grouped up right here. Enough damage was being taken to both of them right here. So I figured, oh, I'll throw a revivification down right now. Start getting some healing over time going. Might as well while I got some teammates bunched up that both have some damage on them. So that was a decision to throw my revivification, my puddle heal right there. More often than not, though, in this situation, I would be focusing more on solo targeting like Vodrith right here. I should be focusing a little more on him. But I figure they're not doing too crazy of damage right up front, that I'm able to get some just general maintenance healing going around on the side. Watch the meters rise. See, they're not taking very much damage right now, so I'm just kind of doing some odd and end healing, throwing off my debuff remover, my expunge, just some general AoE healing to just kind of keep everybody kind of topped off. I'm not doing anything crazy. See, I'm starting to get focused here a little bit more. I've been taking a lot of damage, so it's harder for me to focus on other people because I need to stay alive in order to keep healing. So I'm focusing more on movement, some of my instant casts to try to get into a better line of sight position over here, because I've got people more focusing on me now. So I'm trying to use this box in the middle as kind of a kiting mechanism to cut off people's vision, especially the ranged DPS, from being able to see me and AoE me down. See, right there, my innervate got interrupted, so I wasn't able to finish the full cast. So that's a good example of using your interrupts. See how much that kind of affected me. Like one of my better heals was cut halfway through. And I'm being stunned right now, so it's kind of harder to throw some heals out. Right now, I have a relic, which you may or may not have, but this gives me a bunch of alacrity. So it kind of works as like a second polarity shift. The effects aren't quite as strong as the polarity shift, but it's a lot of alacrity. So when I'm starting to get into like a perilous situation, I'll throw that off as well. And that kind of works like my polarity shift. So you'll see me using that here and there too, to just increase all of my global cooldown speed, and so that I can just use more of my abilities faster. So you'll see me throwing that off here and there. See, I got focused there. And I think I was trying to use my barrier instead of my force walk, my phase walk, but right there is exactly the moment that you should be using your phase walk, so that I would have teleported out of there. I figured I could have survived because I had my big heal going off, and I was going to be able to get my big double dark infusion heal off as well as my dark heal. Little bit of an error right there, but you see how fast and reactive you need to be. But right there would have been the perfect moment to throw off the phase walk and just kind of teleport out of there, heal up a little bit, get back in there. So that's exactly why I set it up there in the first place. But I kind of botched that there. So we're not all perfect. It's okay to learn. See? My heal off? I actually forget to reset my phase walk right there because I saw the other one and I was like, wait, that was mine, right? A little distracted. Just get back in there, start topping people off, throwing some heals around. I'm not doing like any optimal rotation for heals right here. I'm just kind of situationally trying to see who's taking the most focus right now. Potato's starting to go down a little bit. It's getting a little kind of chaotic in here, but I'm just kind of doing some general maintenance. I'm not trying to just pump a bunch of numbers into anyone right now because I kind of want to keep everybody more at a consistent level rather than, you know, pumping a bunch of heals into like one thing. But Potato's kind of in a tough spot right now. He's over there. I try to get some stuff off, but he's kind of in a tough spot because he's also running far away from me. You see how he either got pushed or for whatever reason he's going way out here outside of my range, and it's kind of hard to get to him. It's gonna happen. Don't feel bad. And I'm also being focused in here too, so I can't get over to him. So I had to bubble. See, like right there would have been pretty good for the bubble heal or the bubble shield for everyone. Yeah, what I'm talking about, I was doing some like theory crafting in my head of if I had the tactical that gave my teammates static barrier there, that could have been a little kind of useful there, but in general it's just not. But yeah, I'm getting focused hard. Notice how I went for my phase walk, but I forgot to reset it. So there's that. So it's so far it's not looking too great. Not so far the game's not looking too great, but we end up pulling it around and it gets a lot cleaner. So don't lose heart. Don't panic. Just know that if you're starting to get focused, it's getting a little bit harder. People are interrupting your abilities and stuff. Don't panic. It's okay. You'll be fine. We'll get through this. I remembered my phase walk. Looky there, brother. My big instant heal I was about to be able to get some big heals off right here was interrupted by a Sentinel's or a Juggernaut's leap right there. Very good. It's good. It's on the enemy team because they've been shutting me down a lot. I'm still able to do some pretty decent healing, but they're giving me some issues. So it's gonna happen. So this is a good Warzone to show that, you know, I'm being messed with. I'm not able to sit there and free cast and get some crazy numbers, but that's what I mean. You don't need crazy numbers. You need just effective heals. I also very much dislike that a lot of fights, especially in this Warzone, are for whatever reason, people are just like running up here on these sides. There's no cover or anything for me up here. So like having to like come out this way and not being able to use this box over here in order to heal people is just terrible because I've got nowhere to go, no line of sight to use, and I'm just like a sitting duck. So if you're watching this and you happen to be a DPS or anything, try to keep the fight in the middle. Don't bring these fights all the way to the side. It just makes it harder on your healers. It leaves ranged DPS more exposed. Keep the fight in the middle. Keep the fight in the middle. So I phase walked out of there. I probably would have been fine if I just would have cloud minded, but I felt like I was starting to get more focused by multiple different people. And even if I got my cloud mind off, I would still be getting nuked. So I went ahead and just got out of there to just lose some of the aggro. able to get some more heals off. And if I would have been back there, it would have taken me much longer to get back into the fight and help this person out. So that's kind of why I put it a little more over here instead of off to the back. So be intentional of where you put your phase walk location. Now this frees me up to do a little bit more freeze casting or free casting. So a good strategy as well, you can kind of use your phase walk a little more offensively. You get in there, you can pull a lot of aggro, a lot of people focusing on you, then you just phase walk out of there even before you take a bunch of damage. It kind of gets them scrambled and the enemy team can't figure out which target to go to next, or they'll start splitting their DPS amongst different targets. It kind of throws off their flow. So you can kind of use it offensively as well. It's a little more strategy to think about it that way. Again, jumped on immediately. They know I'm healing. They can see me. It hurts. Go ahead and just kind of force speed out of there. This guy's chasing me around a lot. Right there, I throw off my stun. And that's what I was saying earlier on how to utilize a stun. Preventing damage from being done. Might as well use it. It's there. Doesn't cost all that much. But it provides me a little bit of time to get away and be able to get some more heals off. Maybe save someone or just top me off a little bit more. Because if they're just focusing on me and I can just heal myself, that's fine. My teammates shouldn't be taking much damage at that point. But it's tough. Some people can really hurt. Go ahead and force speed out of there. Is getting a little tricky. Running low on force. Use my corrupting darkness. Just kind of top myself off a little bit. I'm being focused like crazy. Man. Perma-stun constantly. Yeah. They want me. They're hungry for me. But that's good. That's just kind of how it goes as a healer. It's going to happen. The enemy team knows what they're doing. They're ahead by a little bit. OP. So now I'm utilizing this line of sight in the middle so that anybody coming in from over here, more likely they're going to be focusing on what's going on over here, but I'm trying to block myself off from over there and from these people as much as I can, creating a barrier between what's going on here and over here, kind of filtering back and forth. There's more people over here right now, so I'm less worried about out there, especially because the explosion just happened. But line of sight, huge. If you didn't watch my tips and tricks video that I released about a month ago, check that out for just general tips. But it's very, very, very critical, is putting something between you and the enemy, some sort of object, always good. Being focused pretty hard again. Got to use some cooldowns because they're starting to jump on me. I'd also highly recommend, if you can afford some space on your toolbar for your hotkeys, throwing some of your oh crap buttons onto quick hotkeys. It makes it a little easier to get to. It's okay to have some abilities. I like some of my GCDs as just like a visual clicky that I can click, just personally. It's just how I've played forever, and it doesn't make a huge difference. But I've got my force bubble on F3, so that's a quick causal click thing that I can just keep clicking in a quick emergency. But yeah, I would always recommend hotkeying every single ability you possibly can. If you've got like an MMO mouse or anything, if I had a mouse that had more buttons on it, I'd probably put some more of these, but I've only got a couple on my mouse, so there's that. Bubbling right now. Yeah, I forgot to set my force walk again, so that kind of shot myself in the foot. But I'm able to resurgence myself and force speed and then innervate. Big little tip right here. You can force speed and innervate at the same time as long as you have the ability to move while you're using innervate, but make sure you press force speed and then innervate. If you press innervate and then force speed, it'll cancel your innervate. So force speed and then innervate, and you can heal yourself with innervate while you're force speeding away, which is very, very good. I just did that there, so keep that in mind. Throw off a stun there because they're trying to do damage to me. They probably would have killed me if I hadn't. Very clutch. Team is able to finish off a little bit. Doing some top off healing. Taro Jaro is also doing some healing. Seems like they're doing a good job healing as well. Notice we're pulling in the lead now too. We've gotten some orbs. Teammates, DPS needs to generally be focusing on that. I think in this match I'm actually able to get some orbs as well. So again, wins are what matters. You need to win in order to get your dailies and weeklies so that you can get that better gear. So keep an eye on objectives. General heals. General heals. They love me. They love me. I kind of want them to jump on me in this position because I have a lot more outs than some DPSs and stuff. I got more GCDs and stuff. I don't mind them jumping on me in certain situations and making myself more of a target sometimes because I have more outs than some of my allies. Whew. Scary. Running low on force, so you see me kind of trying to spam some consuming darkness. Got a decent amount of force back without having to get weary because of the procs. It all happens very fast, but you can also pause and slow down this video if you want through the YouTube player, so you can kind of see which abilities I'm picking and when at a slower pace. We're winning by a little bit. Not by much. Again, trying to use this basically as much as I can on cooldown when it's available, because it costs nothing. It's good to use your unnatural preservation, just a little self-heal. Costs you nothing. I'm starting to get a little low on force, so I want to get my innervates off and throw consuming darkness out. Yep, just like that. Need to be more... I'm actually throwing off a little bit of DPS right here and throwing out crushing darkness onto this target because they're marked, so I'm guessing somebody else marked them, and that's usually an indication that they're a healer. So I want to throw just a little bit of extra dot damage on them while we're not taking a bunch of damage. Just a little bit. Sometimes that happens. You'll do a whole innervate and you won't get any consuming darkness stacks. That's just feels bad, man. Feels bad. Almost able to get some orbs there, but I think I get some orbs here in just a second. Yeah, see, I'm throwing out DPS right here because they're not doing too much damage. Taro's getting a little bit of damage, but more likely than not, their team, the last two of their team in here, are about to die, and he'll be able to just heal himself up. So that's what I'm saying. I could just sit here and number pump, but it's better to be a better teammate and just throw out more damage so that they can die so that we can get more orbs and then they can just do their like self-heal over time ability once we get out of combat. So that's the idea here. I don't need to be pumping this guy's health up right now because they're not going to be doing enough damage to even kill him, so nothing to worry about. All right, able to get these orbs, so throwing some objectives in there while it's open. The good thing about the Sorcerer as well, with that force speed, it only takes you about like 16 to 18, 15, between 15 and 18 seconds from once you have the orbs to getting to your pylon. So if you still got like 20 to 25 seconds left on the clock, you probably still have enough time to be able to collect some orbs and run it to the pylons to get some extra points. So it could be clutch. We should win this. It should be over. Didn't really need these orbs, but it's just extra. I think I get an award for a medal for it, so that's pretty nice. Which is good, which is very good, because I'll have my daily done, and I'll just need one more win for the weekly, which I can probably get at some point later. Yes, the sirens, I know. Those sirens are terrifying. It's just a fact. I'm just throwing out some heals, getting my 4-sec up. Might as well. Doesn't really matter at this point. There's no way to lose. So I'm not really trying to heal or throw out any crazy numbers. I'm just kind of cruising. There's no big rush. The game's already over, so just kind of goofing around, not trying to heal much. Just like number fluff in there at the end. And there you go. Almost 7 million heals that game, and you saw how much I was being interrupted and messed with for most of the time there. They were kind of messing with me. So I could probably double that if, I was able to just free cast the whole time. But that's what I mean. You can see someone with like 10 to 12 million heals, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're just like a crazy good healer. I mean, it could, and it very well might mean that they're very good at what they're doing, but that also could just mean that they were never being targeted and killed and they were just sitting there healing. So keep that in mind, that effective healing and situational healing and being a smart player and teammate is more important than just really high numbers. I had a couple of stuns there that kept me alive so that my team could finish people off so we can get back in there and to get orbs in order to win the game. I was able to get some extra orbs even though we didn't really need it at the end, but yeah, being a good teammate. I could have used extrication a little bit better in that match of pulling my teammates out of a bad situation and maybe behind this middle block to maybe save some people, but I was being focused very hard at the same time as other people, so I kind of had to focus on myself a little bit. Couple of errors with the phase walk made some issues there, but you can see how clutch they can be if you just remember. But yeah, that's just a Warzone match. They all work a little different, but that's kind of how I approach each match. Next up, we have tacticals, and there are a couple tacticals that are very good options. Some are going to be kind of situational. One is going to be a little more ranked PvP and arenas oriented, and the other is going to be more Warzone general PvP. I recommend One for All. It gives your roaming mend a very solid buff. It heals up to 5 targets instead of 4, and roaming mend spreading around buffs and heals to more people on your team more often. It's just better, and an extra target getting the benefits of that is just very, very good. But there is a good argument to be made. If you're starting to get a little more popular as a healer, your name's a little more out there, and it's very obvious that you are the healer, I would recommend the Life Warden. Taking damage below 20% health will rapidly heal you for a large amount. So this just makes you that much harder to kill and that much more annoying, so that if they are jumping on you, they're trying to pound into you as much as they can. You hit that 20%, you get a lot of health back, more opportunity to just make it even harder for you to kill, give you more time to get your damage reduction abilities off and heal yourself up with all of your damage reduction. Phase walk out of there so that they can't even find you, so you can heal up again, get back in there. They have to bash you all the way down again. Then you just force bubble in their face. It just makes you so annoying to kill, and more often than not, they're just going to be focusing on you and trying to kill you anyways. So in ranked PvP, I highly recommend that, because that just makes you a nightmare to try to kill. But if you're just doing general PvP, having the roaming men just heal more targets, it's going to increase your overall healing. Very, very good. Much better. I've seen some people using the all-for-one Revivification's pool concludes with a burst of dark force energy, healing up to 8 allies within it for extra health. But more often than not, people are just touching the pool and they run away from it. So when it ends, they're not even going to get that heal. It's kind of pointless. I think bouncing around roaming mend that gives a buff and a heal to multiple targets, especially it prioritizes the targets that really need it. It's just better. It's just better. Now for the implant vendor, there are a couple that I think stand out from the rest of them that are just very good. The first one I like to use is the duration of polarity shift is the unmatched haste package. The duration of polarity shift is increased by 5 seconds, a very long time for your polarity shift to increase. I think it's normally 10 seconds, but now it's 15. It could be 15 and now it's 20 seconds, but I think it's just 15 because 20 seconds seems like a very long time. Regardless, increasing it by 5 seconds is just super good. Your alacrity just goes through the roof. You're able to heal like crazy. It affects your global cooldown timer. So even if you're starting to blow through a bunch of force with your polarity shift active, using consuming darkness when you get the stacks. It affects the overall cooldown of that. See how it's going way faster now? Boom, boom, boom. It's just so much faster. So you can just sprinkle in your consuming darkness more often. And you'll want to be using polarity shift almost on cooldown. Not immediately once you get into a fight, but pretty much you want to keep it up as often as you can. You want to be a little more situational to when you start using it, but you basically want it on cooldown. Use it whenever you really can. The second one is the Revitalize package. While Resurgence is active on a target, which it's your bread, you're giving it out to everyone, so any sort of buff to that since you're using it constantly, whenever it's active on a target, it has a 15% chance to spontaneously heal that target whenever the target receives non-resurgence healing from you, which is every single time you use Resurgence. You'll use Resurgence, and then you have to pick another ability to use right after that, so every single time you use it, it's going to get a 15% chance to proc extra healing. 15% chance is not that high, but it's significant. It's significant. And it adds overall HPS to your rotation. Just general, don't have to think about it, healing improvement. There is an argument to make for the Empowered Restorers package. Activating Force Barrier puts a barrier on nearby allies, like a static barrier, like your ability, for up to 8 seconds and granting them an additional 25% elemental damage reduction while active. There's an argument to make for this in ranked PvP. I feel like this could be very, very useful. I haven't done much testing with it, but I feel like this could be very clutch in ranked PvP arenas specifically. In Warzones, I don't think you would see that much use of it. I don't think it really helps out all that much, but in ranked PvP, I can see it making a very, very big difference. So that's something to look forward to in ranked specifically. I've debated testing the recklessness reduction by 15%, but with Resurgence causing your Innervate to more likely crit, the cooldown is already 1.5 minutes, so it's already pretty short. 15 seconds doesn't feel like it's enough for me. I think it's just having overall heals, just generally do more healing. Your Resurgence just doing more healing is just better. And then having the cooldown reduction of your polarity shift is just better. Forgot to mention though, whenever you have polarity shift active, it goes on cooldown, but when you use force speed, keep an eye right here, it reduces the cooldown by 5 seconds. So that's why you basically want to be using force speed as often as you can, because it reduces the cooldown of your polarity shift as well. And you want to be using polarity shift as often as you can. So it's on cooldown now. My force speed is refreshed. Boom. Reduces the now we've reduced it by 10 seconds. So you can probably reduce up to 25 seconds off of your, probably like 20 20 seconds off of the cooldown of Polarity Shift as long as you're using your force speed as often as you can after you use Polarity Shift. So once you use Polarity Shift, be intentional about using your force speed more, because it reduces that cooldown so that you can use it again more often. And healing faster, you're going to see higher numbers and better numbers, and you'll be a much better healer in a pinch, both in ranked and in non-ranked PvP. Thank you guys so much for watching this Sorcerer / Sage PvP guide. Like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and definitely follow me on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/Lundawa. I am live nearly every day around 7 or 8 p.m. Eastern time, so come vibe it out, come and hang out. You can even join me on doing some dailies and weeklies. We can play together. I have characters on Starforge and Satil Shan. So this character in this video is on Satil Shan, so feel free to hang out with me over there live. I'll see you in the next one. Peace!